Greetings and salutations, travelers. Welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads, and as always, welcome back to our Around the Hearth discussions. We hope you have been enjoying them this year, these themed discussions that we started in March. They have been enjoyable for us, so hopefully they've been enjoyable for you. We'll have some, probably, it's December when these are coming out, so you will know by this time that we're going to be working around different ideas for the next year, which starts in our next round, which starts in March. So I'm pretty sure it's going to be kind of hard to get rid of March of the mix, because that alliteration is just spot on.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
But we'll see how things go. But we still have Dark DescentBer to get through. I'm still working on that title, so if you guys have some recommendations in the comments below for next year's spooky month or something like that, you can let me know. Before we get into anything, before we get into our subject this time, which is doing cosmic horror right, let's go ahead and get announcements out of the way. I am Adam L. Spain with the Inn of Planar Crossroads, and several other things that I do, but for right now, that's what I'm doing. And we have been doing our Mondays live at 11, and I think maybe starting in January, but it might start in March to coincide with the rest of our stuff. We'll be doing some announcement graphics and scheduling graphics similar to what Avenue Studios has been doing, and we'll share those on Discord and on the social medias to make it easier for people to keep track. But that'll depend on how fast I get the graphic ready and everything. And those Mondays live at 11, those depend on you guys. They happen on YouTube right now, but we'll probably be switching a lot of that live stuff and a lot of our uploads first on Rumble and then mirrored to YouTube, depending on how things go for us. And that's mainly what I've got as far as announcements. So, as of recording, we're at 1178 on our subs. So when we get up to 2,000, I'm pretty sure, when we get up to, let's make it closer. Let's make it like 15. When we get to 15, we'll do something like that. And I may do something, before then, if I get a wild hair too. But that's me hogging up announcement time. Let's do Avenue Studios, and then A Squirrel Plays.
All right. Hello, Dan and Kristen from Avenue Studios. You can find us on YouTube, Rumble, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. and of course, join us 6:30 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays for our After Quest program. That's a live actual play we do, and we'll be coming to the end relatively somewhere in January, so soon when this comes out. And,
of our Nobles campaign.
Our Nobles campaign, yes. We'll be looking at some new ones after that, but a couple of our people in our team have to have babies first, so we might have a little break and try some new stuff. So
it's not me.
No. So now you threw me off.
Sorry, bud.
What else do we got? Of course, join us Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern for our side of the collaboration for these themed months, where we build a one-shot and play test it. So we are actually going to have 2 games in December. So I'll announce that here, since this will be the first one coming out, that we're going to have one with Alex from AfterQuest running us in a horror game. That'll be our patron game, where our supporters get entered into a raffle and can play with us. And then at the end of the month, we're going to do a special collaboration with OKSDM. He is going to run us through his Sagas system, along with DM Tales, Tyler from MinMaps Podcast, and of course Adam from the Inn of Planar Crossroads. So I'm really looking forward to 2 horror games live played, and we do that over on Rumble, and then it's uploaded to YouTube afterwards. So join us for that. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right, and you guys are going to be finishing up also your longest running campaign.
Yes,
that'll be coming out.
The goal is to be done in March. Will be our last shoot, maybe February.
5 years.
5 years.
This month, yeah.
It's a long time.
All right. Looking forward to it.
Okie dokie. What you got, Skrat?
It's me, Skrat from Squirrel Plays over on YouTube. Still trying to figure out what to do with my life for the most part, but I like to consider it a video essay style channel. We talk about the mechanics of storytelling, like character and world building, but also the mechanics of TTRPGs as well, which is also storytelling, but also the actual gameplay mechanics as I explore and discover new TTRPGs, as I still consider myself a newbie, so I got a lot to discover out there. It's been a good ride so far.
Yeah.
And that's it. Short and simple. It's not quite as elaborate as some other people.
Hey, it's taken us, what? It took you guys 5 years, and I'm still on like 7, or well, I'm on 8 now, I think. So.
We just like to talk.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
So.
I don't know that I say much, but I'll talk for a while.
Yeah. Oh, I did think of something before we get into the shout out this time, which I need to actually pull up anyway. When you made a misspeak there, you said podscats or something. I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
something like
if
that.
Skrat ever does a podcast, he should call it Podscrats.
Podscrat.
Scrap pods.
Oh, it's
That's so
great.
All right. Let me see. I'll go over to my subscription so I can pull up. That's our announcements out of the way. Let me get our actual shout out this time. And it is for someone that I think I saw shouted out either by Skrat or by DM Tales. So let me pull them up. There we go. It is Wiz and Pippi Adventures, as they explore RPGs with Wiz and Pip. Games,
Wasn't
lore, and GM guides.
I am not familiar. Wiz and Pip?
Yes,
Pippi.
they're very new. So Wiz and Pippi Adventures, they have 11 videos so far and 92 subscribers. So we can really boost them up some. So tell them the Inn of Planar Crossroads sent you, and it has a kind of black mage looking character who has a sidekick named Pippi or Pip that is a hamster that looks like a Hamtaro hamster. So there you go.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That is who I've got for our shout out this time. And that was Levi's shout out. We're continuing his namesake. He is not here this time. We are recording in November. We record a month ahead of time. And he had stuff going on, as it was a Veterans Day thing, so maybe it was that. I don't know. But he had stuff going on, so we're still carrying on his namesake. But that means our announcement's done.
Keep going, I just got a kid. Oh.
No worries.
Carry on.
Our announcement's done. Our shout-outs are done. And that means it's time to grab our preferred beverage. And you can as well, viewer, as you join us around the hearth while we discuss doing cosmic horror right. Skål.
Yay.
Okay. Ooh, horror squirrel.
Nice. I'm happy.
Horror Skrat engaged. All right. So, let's do this. We've got the doing cosmic horror right. This is kind of my wheelhouse. These guys don't do a lot of cosmic horror, so that's okay. Yet. But that's okay. I wanted to... We'll bring up our core points, or some core points, and things like that, before we get into too much. So, some notes that I had for us is... And key points to understand is... Don't describe everything when you're doing cosmic horror. And maybe before we engage, cosmic horror is something like you see in Lovecraft, where it contemplates man's insignificance in the universe based upon certain presumptions of ideas about where universe come from or different things like that. So that is something to consider. So, don't describe everything, because part of cosmic horror is the unknown. That's one of Lovecraft's most famous quotes, is that the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. And I think that's actually on a little plaque outside his house that's on a historic thing or something like that. So let that unknown portion kind of sit and ruminate in the atmosphere that you're building. So that's something you can use. You can, if your players are up for it, if they've kind of signed on to this idea of having something really be scary, really be unsettling, then you can play into things you know they're afraid of. You can use real horrors and real phobias to kind of sprinkle in, but you have to be very careful with that and let your players have to be on board with the idea of actually dealing with some of those things. So don't just do that on them right without talking to them first. Session 0, we always say. Going along with the idea of not describing everything is that not all questions need answers. Because again, there's that idea of the unknown and what that means. You can use things you find awe-inspiring. And the reason I say that is that you can let your players describe things that they find that they might be thinking that their character is seeing. That's another option. But when you use things that you find awe-inspiring, this idea comes from a video that was done by Tale Foundry that kind of presented the idea of real-life angels that are described in Scripture, and how they're described as being these crazy things that blow your mind, and they say, fear not. Why do they say fear not? Because they do not look like they should exist. They're crazy looking. So when you really start to wrap your head around that, they inspire awe and almost a terror. But they say fear not, because they're not always evil. And so I think Tale Foundry's video called it the sublime. There's a positive and a negative idea of the sublime. And when you can take something and describe it in a certain way, it becomes terrible or awe-inspiring and majestic. So I encourage people to go watch that video because it's pretty good. And as far as things you can read or listen to, there is, of course, Lovecraft's fiction. That works. There is Zelia Bishop, I think, is another author that worked with him and collaborated with him. Algernon Blackwood is someone that Lovecraft read. He did something that was pretty good, especially if you want to see a well-done story about a Wendigo. Read his story, The Wendigo, or listen to it. It's free you can find it on YouTube is where I listen to it. So you can find it everywhere. And all of this stuff is in the public domain right now. So have fun with it. You can do whatever you want to with it. But those are some good authors. Even Conan, Robert E. Howard and Lovecraft were contemporaries, and they knew each other. So they would play around in each other's universes. So when you read about those strange, weird, dead things from the past in Conan, it's because he's kind of drawing in some of that from the Lovecraftian style universe. So those are tips on how to do a cosmic horror right that's more pulp Cthulhu than Call of Cthulhu. So there is that to think about. And so I've started us off with some key points. Is there anything you guys want to start bringing up or stuff like that? Because I can talk all night about cosmic horror. So
yeah, I just wanted to reiterate your thought about not over describing stuff. It's kind of like the classic thing we say about horror movies too. Once you see the monster, a lot of times the magic is lost. It's the suspense and the fear of what it might be, and letting the viewer, or in the game case, the player, fill in the blanks, because they'll fill it in with what really scares them. Just
That's
naturally.
what I really liked. It was an older monster movie. It was before this style got popular. Was it Cloverfield?
There's
The one where
Cloverfield.
they filmed it through like somebody's own little camera, before cell phones, right? So they were
Well, you're
running
talking
around
about-
with a video camera.
Oh, you're talking about Blair Witch?
Blair Witch.
What it was like? I haven't seen that movie, but I was told it was like that.
Mm,
But Cloverfield was like a Godzilla movie
Oh,
through
yeah.
somebody's camera.
Yep.
So yeah, you just saw tiny snippets of the monster, like at the very beginning of the movie. They're having a birthday party or whatever, and you hear some crashing outside, and you just see the statues of Liberty's head just come crashing through the street, and you're like, okay, that's not good. So you'll see a hand or a foot of this giant thing every so often, and I think at the very, very end you finally get to see it. But I remember really, really liking that way back then.
Way back then.
Way back then.
It makes me think of the movie Signs, where
Yeah.
there's the birthday party and all of a sudden you see the fuzzy alien thing
Little
walking in
gray
the
guy
background.
steps
That
out
like
half a second.
freaked me out when I first saw it, and then you see fingers. Like you don't see it until the end, and then once you see it, it's still creepy, but it lost its suspense.
I do love
And then it
that
dies by
concept.
water. Why did it come to
Yeah.
Earth? I don't know.
Yeah.
I was actually going to ask if that fit into this category, if that movie did.
Of
I
science.
mean, I guess
or
it doesn't make
Cloverfield?
sense. So why
well,
doorknobs? Yeah, but I do love that scene. That's one of my. Joaquin Phoenix does such a good job there when he's like. I love that scene.
you just like watching people that act. It didn't matter if it
I
was
do.
a good movie or not. I think something like a few of M. Night Shyamalan's movies do fit into this a little bit. They don't necessarily fit into cosmic horror, but they do fit into a more suspenseful kind of horror, which is something that cosmic horror benefits from, is suspense. And like Cloverfield, even though it's got a lot more action in it than a traditional kind of cosmic horror movie, especially something by Lovecraft, it still does have that unknown level in it for the viewer. Now, the people in that actual moment, they see the monster better than the viewer does. But you, as the viewer, you get to experience it in a more suspenseful, close to cosmic horror kind of way. And then the Signs one, I don't know if that would qualify as cosmic horror, really, because there's nothing. It's spooky, it's suspenseful, but there's no existential kind of idea about these aliens. They are aliens. So it is a suspenseful alien movie. And it's a good kind of distinction. And it's kind of a gradient you can go on. So recently, Nicolas Cage was in a movie The Color Out of Space, which is directly a adaptation. It's not the best. It's not how I would necessarily do an adaptation, but it is a fair adaptation of the actual movie of the actual story of Color Out of Space. But The Color Out of Space is hard to do because it's an indescribable color. So they went with a kind of pink magenta type of color, which is an unnatural color a lot of the times, so you don't find it a lot in nature, so I could see why they went with it. But if you were to kind of grade them, you'd have Signs over here that doesn't really have a lot of cosmic horror. Then you go to M. Night Shyamalan's... then you go to the Cloverfield one, which is starting to lean towards that, starting to go towards this undescribable, this thing that we didn't know, this unknown that has come to Earth. And then it eventually would get into something like The Color Out of Space. So, as far as the movies, that's what I would kind of go for. Another movie that we were talking about before this chat started, Alien, the first one, has cosmic horror elements in it. Because there's this ancient thing that they find on this far-off planet, and they don't understand it. And bear in mind, none of the other alien stuff had come, so we didn't know, like, precursors and all the lore and stuff like that. And we didn't have AVP or anything like that. There were no aliens fighting predators. They didn't exist in the same universe. It was just this standalone movie about this thing that was older than man, that came from a time before man, that was uncaring and unfeeling and was, you were just food type of thing. And the tagline, which we're going to be using in our next chat as the title, in space, no one can hear you scream. That kind of idea, that kind of statement is a very Lovecraftian statement. No one can hear you scream. So, that's a very interesting way to take a cosmic horror and boil it down to a very personal level for, in this case, space. But in other cases, again, there's plenty of stories that do it well.
I was thinking about some practical things you can do at the table to create suspense too. One is, I always love a little ambience, and there's so many tools out there for ambient music and stuff that can really help set the mood. I've read this one guy who was running a False Hydra game did this great thing where he started having a white noise underneath and just would always play it, and then he slowly was increasing the volume as the game went on, and then took it away at a certain point, and it just all of a sudden everyone realized it wasn't there, and it created all this suspense. I mean, you got to build that up. You got to take your time with it to have that. And then other things like, I love the False Hydra. It's one of my favorites. Which it's definitely horror. It's not quite cosmic. It could be because you're erasing people. But one other person, another GM, just kept setting up an extra chair and never said anything about it until the end of the whole side quest with the False Hydra, and then said, actually, your party used to be one bigger, and you just all forgot about it, and the whole time the seat had been there. It was the seat for that player that was never actually there. Genius. I love the setup payoff stuff that takes like weeks to pay off.
Says the guy who's run a 5-year campaign. See?
Yes. you gotta put in the time. But even little stuff, there's the classic ones I'm sure a lot of people have heard, like writing on a note. Because if a lot of times with these cosmic horrors, you're probably playing with what is reality and what is not reality, and creating some tension within the party of writing on notes and passing them to people, and they might not even say anything important, but they're like, "Don't show this to anyone," and that's all it says. Just take it and slide it, you know. Or you pass notes out to everyone, and you say, somebody is infected with whatever, you know, or somebody's not really who they say they are, and you pass that to everybody. And no one really knows. And then, of course, the classic. Just randomly roll your dice.
Yeah, I like to do that one.
Yeah, it's always good, right?
Well, I'll do it. We play in Foundry, and I have it set up to where they'll see the dice roll across the screen, but it's all question marks, so they have no idea what it landed on.
Yes! That's a good point, too, because nowadays with VGG, you can still do that and still create that tension. It's always good, especially if they're like going on some good RP and they're really trying to figure out the problem, and then randomly you just
I like to do it when they don't move, when they're sitting there too long, and all right.
They start moving in.
Yep.
And the answer is always nothing.
Don't worry about
I
it.
pushed the wrong button, I promise.
You just tell them, don't worry about it. You'll find out.
I think one time I did that, and they were asking, what's that for? And I said, nothing this time.
Ooh, that's a good one, too.
Yeah.
There are little things you could say, too. The classic, all these little things like, well, that's what you think it is. That's what you think it is. They roll a success on something. That's what you believe. That's what your character believes. Yeah.
You think so?
Yep. Those are kind of universal, but I think in this type of game, it really starts to stack when everyone's already bought in that we're messing with what is real and what is not. Going into that game, going back to the session 0. So doing those little things, it's so satisfying to get those sighs and eye rolls from the players.
There's also a benefit, well, to touch on what you were saying with the cosmic horror with the false hydra, that actually does work. Messing with memory, messing with the perception of what the players, not just the characters, but what the players believe is actually happening. That can be very useful. So definitely try that out. You just in a one time in your game or something. You don't even have to be doing a cosmic horror game. Just mess around with it a little bit. We talked about this on the Augustine Illusions, during our Augustine Illusions chat. We were talking about those type of things. So don't be afraid to get surreal with people, because that kind of goes along with it. And then the mystery with the dice rolling that you guys were talking about, that's a really good mechanic, especially if you have them roll and only you see what the result is. If only the GM sees what the result is. That can be especially effective, because then they have no frame or filter. The players have no frame or filter to be able to say, yeah, but I rolled low. They won't know what they rolled. So you can do it two ways. You can let them roll and not see. You got to have a little buy-in for this one, because people like to roll and see what they got. So, But if you're playing in a game where you guys like, okay, it's cosmic horror, guys, it's kind of spooky, you guys roll in my thing. You guys roll on this side of the you can do a DM screen if you want to, or you can have it, I think there's a setting in there where you can have it roll for the DM.
VTTs, yeah.
So only the DM sees it.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. They roll an investigation roll. They get something really good, and you tell them the truth this time. You tell them plenty of information. They roll again later on, and they don't get it. And now there's this information they had before, but now they've got this other information. Which information are they going to trust? Because they haven't seen the rolls.
Right.
So,
That's a great idea. And setting it up ahead of time, letting everyone know that's how it's going to be, they're already going to be a little stressed out to start, I think. No, like the player in me would be like, but I don't know. that meta is that's a really great point.
You don't know. There's an element of the unknown, and the elements of the unknown.
We had talked about it, I think, in the Apocalypse chats, about trying to find as many ways as possible to put the player and the character in the same emotional place. Just anywhere you can get those close, it just makes it that much better. So with that, especially like information and perception rolls and stuff like that, if you don't know the role, because no matter how good you are at staying out of the meta, there's still that. It does take a little of the suspension of disbelief away. And so if you don't know the role, you actually don't know which information, if you got conflicting answers, you don't know which role's the higher one. You yourself, the player, you don't even have to act that or think like the character. That's awesome.
Yeah. Like I said, player buy-in for it, but it pays off when they do.
Yeah.
Because then they feel like they're solving the mystery, or they're defeating this problem. I got one more thing, but I think, let me see what it is. We're getting kind of close to time already. So, Skrat, you had some question or something like that written down, I think.
I had a whole bunch before we needed them to fill in the time, but y'all are doing fine. I got one I want to ask.
Okay, you do that one then, for sure.
You want me to go ahead, or are you going to say something?
No, go ahead, and then we'll do some final thoughts.
Alright, this is one that I found. It was, How do you balance giving players a sense of power and agency while maintaining the overwhelming dread that is cosmic horror?
Well,
That's an interesting question.
you have a lot of options open to you. More than a lot of people might think. So, with cosmic horror, death is not always the end, nor is it always the goal of whatever entity you're dealing with. One of the things about cosmic horror is that this thing may just be indifferent to your existence. This you're just a speck on a speck on a speck to, like, Cthulhu or something like that, or especially Yog-sothoth, but Cthulhu or Shub-nigguroth or something like that. You don't mean anything to them. So they might not directly want to take you out. It's about surviving that you want to do. And so making sure that the characters understand that this isn't something I'm expecting you to kill or something like that. You're just expected to stop it. I think we can go back to our, as an example, we can go back to we did a chat about the King in Yellow and the wine in the cellar that he would want. This Louisiana, our chat on that. Can't remember which one it was right off the bat.
Yeah.
Haster's Wine, I think is what we called it. That may be from last year.
Mm-hmm.
But in that one, we recommended that the players did not face the King in Yellow. They didn't face Haster. They instead were trying to prevent Haster from getting there in the first place. And that's where agency can come in. It's not so much that they're trying to be able to destroy this thing. They just have to prevent it from happening in the first place. For that prevention of something bad happening. And that can be very useful in allowing the players to feel agency over a situation. If you make them aware, hey, if he gets here, there's no stopping him. What do you want to do to prevent him from getting here? Now they feel agency. Now they feel pressure also to prevent that from happening. And then you let them figure it out. And you, as the GM, don't even have to know how they're going to do it. You just have to present them with the problem and let them find a solution. It's good to have a general idea, but, you can just present them with the problem and be like, that would make sense, or that would work. So.
Yeah, I just to echo off of that a bit, definitely with these, like the Call of Cthulhu especially, you do have to know walking in what it is. It's like you had mentioned, Pulp Cthulhu versus Call of Cthulhu. Like, if you're getting into these mind benders, usually ahead of time, you want to double check that people understand how those systems work and what the point and the goal is. So everyone's kind of on the same page to start. And then I'm thinking back to some of the things Zek had mentioned when we kind of talked about this idea of agency. I think it was in the Apocalypse one, where giving the players agency, even though in the story the characters might not, but you're stepping outside and the players are getting to decide some things. Exactly what you're saying, Adam, is telling that. And I think I want to do some more Call of Cthulhu. I've not had a lot of experience with that, but so this is definitely assumptions on my part. So correct me if I'm wrong, Adam. But a lot of it being storytelling together with these things, playing and saying, talking with the players about their characters. I did a great. I almost said it like it sounded like I thought it was amazing. I did something that I found very enjoyable. It's a better way to phrase it. With my players in my main campaign, where the necromancers were using mental attacks, and we talked ahead of time. I was like, what are the top fears for your characters? I want to use that in this assault. I let them know ahead of time it's going to be a challenge event and role play, and that was a lot of fun, and they really felt it because they sat and thought about their characters and talked about the fears they had, and so they knew it was coming, and then navigating that they still felt very much agency because they, as the players, had all the decisions to make on how they were going to handle it. But in reality, the characters were trapped in a necromancer's mind palace, being tormented. So, I don't know. I just want to shout out Zach on that. I think you really had a good point there.
Yeah.
What do you think as a player? Is there anything for you?
Well, I was just thinking along the lines of giving them doable goals, because nothing's worse than rolling a nat 20 and, well, you still didn't do it. And it's like, what? You know, like, that could be so frustrating as a player. You're like, so this was pointless. So, you know, so giving them doable goals definitely makes them feel like their character's making a difference and they have agency in the world and stuff, so.
And I think bouncing off of that, with the great thing about these cosmic horror things is too, if, like Adam, you were saying, having this basic goal that is doable, going through that, and this would have to be set up ahead of time, make sure everyone's on the same page, that the character is going to be mentally and emotionally destroyed through this. So the fun of this horror type game is, let's see what's left of the character by the end, or what looks like, and that joy, because knowing that ahead of time, the joy and fun of the game is that descent into darkness. Even if you succeed, nothing's ever the same.
Right. All right. Okay. So we are probably going to be a little over time. We try to shoot for 30 minutes, but,
it's always the goal. Never lose the goal.
So there you go.
Doesn't matter if we hit it. Just have it.
All right. So let's see. Do either one of y'all want to go first? Do you want me to do my final thought first?
Yeah, go for it, Captain.
All right. So my final thought will be kind of, I think, going off of yours a little bit, those attainable goals, and seeing what's left over after. So my final thought is, usually when you're going into a game like this with a cosmic horror game, people understand that their characters are never going to be the same after this. They will be changed. You're gonna have real tough times, kind of justifying if the if the player's mind is going to be stable after seeing such sublime things, whether they're good sublime or bad sublime. It doesn't matter. Those things can wreck your brain. So, wrapping your head around that and allowing your players to understand it's okay if the character doesn't make it. It's not necessarily about the character making it or being full and complete at the end. It's about the story that goes along. This did not happen in my head. I don't care what Kane and everybody else says.
And they're not here to defend it.
They're not here to defend themselves. I remember playing a game of Fiasco with them long time ago, like 9 years ago now, in between another game we were playing with the channel that I had done stuff for before. And in it, I had brought in a little bit of the Lovecraftian bit, unsurprisingly. And I was this lady, and she ended up making it to the end. She ended up surviving. Not everybody else did, and a lot of stuff changed. But she ended up becoming different. She had a lot of scars from her past and stuff, and then at the end, she ended up being this Louisiana kind of cat lady woman, but she didn't just have cats around because she liked cats. She had cats around because she was a Louisiana woman witch, and that's how she ended it. She went from being like a sex worker to ended up having that power at the end, and she was never the same, but it told a good story. And so it was really, I liked it. And it didn't happen in my head, okay? Didn't. I couldn't have told all the stories that they were doing. Well, I could have, but I didn't. All right, that's me. Who's next?
Oh, yeah. I love that. I believe you. I think I want to just reiterate just the session 0 and also checking ahead with players just to make sure no one's thinking we're going into a heroic campaign or a dungeon delve. Like, making sure everyone knows what they're getting into, and once they're, like we've been saying, once the buy-in's there, it's going to pay off so much. So just making sure everyone knows what this looks like and just the general idea is going to add so much, because then everyone's getting ready and there's all that anticipation of going in for a horror game. You're just ready, and then just set the mood, ambience. Just, it doesn't take much, just a little bit, just to get everyone there. If you're on a VTT, there's great overlays you can use and other little lighting effects. You don't have to go crazy, but those little touches can really make a difference just to get everyone in that mindset. Anything for you?
I don't think so. I was thinking along the same lines of the ambience, having your music, turning lights off, maybe having candles, that kind of thing, to like good. Just really, yeah, and definitely talking about your players, talking to them about it beforehand, and giving them the expectations of what might happen.
Nothing will be the same.
Yep.
So they're just along for the ride, so that makes it more fun.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Vampire Squirrel.
Bring it home.
So, having never played or ran one of these games, the whole time I was imagining, like what you guys have already mentioned, Session 0 being, it's already important, but I would imagine it's just that much more important for these ones, because you can really get into some messed up stuff if you wanted to, or not even like messed up stuff, but it could be stuff that people really aren't comfortable doing. And you were talking, or just in your final thoughts about, hey, your character's going to change through this. So the first campaign I ran was absolutely not any kind of horror thing, but the entire campaign story took everybody's backstories. I said, do whatever backstory you want. I will intertwine them together and make it happen. And
nice.
They all went on their own quest line that was based solely on their character, and I ran them absolutely through the dirt and then some. The monk gave up their religion by the end of it. The cleric almost did too, but she did like mentally snap for a little while. That was pretty great. It was a fun time.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Awesome.
Session 0, though, I would say that would be my final thought, is put a little extra love and care into that. If this is the route you're going to go.
Yeah. And these are usually some shots, one-shots. A lot of games.
Yeah, that's a good thing to mention. Yeah.
Don't. Yeah. I mean, you have tables that play Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu, but a lot of those adventure paths have mysteries, and they're much more about mystery than they are about really being terrifying, to really being scary to the player. It's more about playing through something scary as that character that you've made up, or that is in there if you want to play a pre-gen. So that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're doing your session 0s.
I was going to ask how long these games typically last in comparison to, regular fantasy campaign and stuff. Are they generally shorter? I'm assuming.
Well, the actual Call of Cthulhu game, it has a tabletop game. It has several modules, and you can kind of string them together loosely as a campaign, and it could last a while. It could last for several sessions. Some tables have played that for a few years in a row from doing it. But like I said, those are a lot more detective kind of intrigue with the Cthulhu mythos mixed in. It's not straight up really terrifying. And it's possible to do that. I was wanting to mention this because Skrat brought up explaining things. it's possible to scare people and touch on their phobias and fears without being very eloquent about it. Because I can be kind of purple in my language and get kind of good at it with doing that, but you don't have to. You couldn't actually do it with and not mean to. So, be aware.
Might discover new phobias too.
Yeah. Now we're all afraid of the deep water.
Oh, man.
Oh, I didn't see that one before.
I guess these types of games would be a prime candidate for those safety systems that you do after so many sessions or whatever. Or every other session. I forget what they're called. Like, what one's roses and something like that.
Oh, I don't know. I just talk to my players.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
It's just ways to communicate. That's all it is. It ain't nothing fancy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we better get this one signed off because we got to get to the next one. So, we hope you viewers have had a wonderful time hearing about cosmic horror and how to do it right in your game. So, not exactly the brightest of subjects, but one that can be quite entertaining when done right.
Sounds like you're talking about me.
No. You're all right.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
But, as always, have a great day. God bless and enjoy. Bye.
Bye.
This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.
Okay. Alright. Cosmic horror out of the way. Now we've got No One Can
Nailed it.
Hear You Scream. Alright.
Three. Okay. I can't. We were just joking a little while ago about all the new lingo, and I just can't keep up. I'm such an old man. I ran a game with some younger kids, and they kept saying, "Oh, I got the Riz. I got Riz."
I hate that one.
Riz
What
just
is
a couple
Riz?
days ago.
And then
Like
someone
your
finally told me, and I was
schwa.
like, "No, that's Cha." Because when it's on the character sheet, it's abbreviated CHA.
Yeah.
What is this Riz nonsense?
Yeah.
I'm not even that old in D&D. I'm like, Dex Cha build, int. Like, what are you guys talking about? Why
No,
does that
they-
pick the middle of the word?
Well, because they're using the lingo from real world and trying to stick it into the game. They literally, that's what
Riz.
why would you use Riz? It's so lazy to use Riz. It's just charisma. You lose Riz by using the word Riz.
That's
Okay.
what I say.
All right.
Sorry. Anyway, that's rant done. Old man rant.
Old man.